then for kosher food, it requires hagala. Or it can be used for utensils in which non-kosher food was cooked using hot water. Let's say a non-kosher piece of meat was cooked with hot water in a dish, in a pot. So of course that would also need hagala. It may also be used to kosher utensils that one is not sure exactly how they were previously used. Some people wait to perform hagala until shortly before Pesach, where a communal hagalas kelim is often held to kosher dishes one wishes to use for Pesach. However, the actual hagala is not that complicated. It can be performed by anyone at any point during the year. So what are the preparations for hagala? Prior to performing the actual hagala, one must make sure all preparations have been executed properly. So first of all, you have to clean the utensil. The first step in preparing the utensil for koshering is that they must be cleaned, and any rust must be removed, as explained by the Rosh. As otherwise, the hagala may not be capable of expelling the prohibited flavor found inside. Says the Rosh in Psachim, Kodem l'chein, tzarech l'shofo, u'lenakoso. Shofo is like rub it, and the koso is clean it, yafeh. Dibinyan acher lo yiflat. If it's not clean, it won't expel the flavor. B'tanya b'sifri. Sifri is a midrashic compilation on psukim in the Chumash. Ach es azav es hakosef. Mikan shetzorech la'avir chluda. Chluda is rust. So the Shulchan Aruch mentions cleaning the utensil in this manner in the context of his description of hagala in the Kli Rishon. Says the Shulchan Aruch this is by the dinim of Pesach. Sakinim, knives, magilim b'Kli Rishon and mutarim. You can put them in a boiling hot water. It's on the fire, and then they're mutter. However, koydem hagala, tzarech l'shufam yaf, you have to rub them. B'mishchas or b'reichayim, you have to sharpen it, or you have to use a stone. La'avir kol chluda shebehem koydem echsherim, to get rid of the rust. Hilkach and yesh bo gumos, if the knife has crevices or cracks, ve'ena yochel nakoso yaf ein mor lo hagala, hagala won't work. Perush, haflata shakelim polti ma'isur shebehem, v'hu miloshen shuro iber v'lo yigal. That's the word hagala. V'tzarech libun b'mokam agumos. So, if you have a kli that has crevices or cracks that you can't clean, you'd have to use libun in those locations. The Mishnah Berurah notes that though one need not remove rust that does not contain any tangible substance, it means we've seen things that are rusted where you can actually like scratch them away. There's a material there. But then sometimes you look at a silver something and it's rusted, it's changes color, but it's not like there's something that's tangible there. And the Mishnah Berurah says that part that you don't have to get rid of. Kol chluda, v'kol zech b'chluda sheyesh b'zeh k'tzat mamashu, says the Mishnah Berurah. Kishegorim also, when you scrape it, misham, yesh sham kama afrurim, there's like some dust. Shaz yesh lachush, so then you have to be worried. Sham yesh tachteh mashu b'mamashu sa'iser be'en, b'chluda mechaser. You have to worry that maybe there's some prohibited food underneath the rust, and the rust is covering it. Aval, imein b'chluda mamashus klal. Let's say there's no tangible thing there. Rak mare bilvad. K'moshe nimtza lefamim sheyesh shachros. It's a little black. Or admumius b'tzad apnimi shel hakli. It's a little red. So then ein kapeda. So that's not a kapeda for hagala. V'chein adin ba'osu k'samim hanasim b'kli b'dil. This is a tin kli, which have stains. She'ein ma'akenes hagala. Kevan she'ein be'em hamashus rak mar bilvad. In contrast, if the utensil contains actual tangible residue, the hagala is invalid even b'di'evet, even if it's already done. Means This is from Kitzur Shulchan Aruch al Basar B'Cholov. Nikui akli, tzarech l'nakos akli heitev. You have to clean it very well. Shlo yisher shum isur be'en adavak bo, so that there's no mamish, be'en isur there. Tissue. Batam lazad ki hagola b'kochel laflit esatam avlua b'kli. Hagola has the ability to remove the absorption that's been absorbed in the kli. Ein b'kochel l'salik b'mosher sa'isur adluka b'kli. But if something's stuck there, that's not going to work. B'mhigel kli b'lishin yiku eite. If you did hagola on a kli that wasn't cleaned well.
So it's just like chatzitza or what?
Well, remember, this is not, chatzitza is usually used in the language of Tumah v'Tahara in a mikveh.
In a mikveh, so is this chatzitza from the water or whatever?
Here he's saying like this: if you have a be'en isser, you got to get rid of it, and that hagolah is not going to do anything to get rid of it. That hagolah gets rid of absorbed flavor that's in the walls of the kli. That's what it does. But if you have be'en isser, that's
rust includes
not rust. Here they're talking about mamish is. Let's say you have
a rust buildup rust.
Not even rust here. Here they're talking about crusted cheese. That's hard, and you haven't cleaned it out, and it's treif cheese. So all the hagolah of the world is not going to solve that. You got to get rid of the be'en isser first. That's what it's talking about here in this issue, and that's why it says mehigel kli b'lishin yikeru heitev. You got to take it back, clean it well. That's why our parents used to use what was that steel wool? Brillo. Exactly. Now, so we're talking about the preparations. So you need to wait 24 hours prior to koshering, not using the kli. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it becomes an Eino Ben Yomo kli. Right? The next step in the preparation process is to wait 24 hours before koshering, during which the utensil is not used at all. The Rosh explains that the reason for this practice is to ensure that the utensils are classified as Eino Ben Yomo, not having been used for 24 hours, thus rendering any absorbed flavor that is expelled during the process to be pogum, tainted, which will not be transferred back into the utensil and prohibited again. So think about it, gentlemen. Let's say it's a ben yomo kli, and it's got basar b'cholov blios in the wall of the kli. And 10 hours after you use the kli, when it was used for basar b'cholov, you do hagolah. Well, the problem is this prohibited flavor is now going to be in the water, and then the kli goes right again and absorbs it from the water. So the kli now has its prohibited absorption again. So once a kli is Eino Ben Yomo, so the absorbed flavor in the wall of the kli is pagum. It's not a prohibited flavor anymore. So therefore, beyond 24 hours, this pagum dika flavor is going to go into the water, and if the kli absorbs that, it's not a problem because it's pagum. That's the reason why we wait 24 hours before koshering. Says the Rosh in Psachim, "Chenami klishu ben yomo ein lahagil, ela im ken yesh b'meyora gdolash shishim levatel plitos akli." Now, you could get away with it if you had an enormous kli where you're doing the hagolah in, where the water is 60 times the displaced volume of the whole kli. Because remember, let's say you have a big spaghetti pot. So let's say that pot was used for something treif. So the absorbed flavor is assumed to be in the whole pot. So the displaced volume of that kli, you would need shishim. And remember, we learned before that it's very rare that you can have shishim against one of those kind of pots. You have to measure it, the whole kli. The imein bo shishim kol niflat bimenu Because if there isn't 60 of amount of water against the volume of the pot, then all of that absorbed flavor that's going to come out, kol haniflat mimenu, chozer v'nivla b'tocho, gets reabsorbed by the same pot. V'shumin b'chamin avitam l'shvach. And not only that, if there's fatty, let's say the absorption was fatty, it's not a pogum flavor. It's a improved flavor. Aval, einan bnei yom. If these kalim are not 24 hours use, mutter lagila filu ein b'mayim shishim levatas hakli. Even if there isn't 60 against the kli. And even though that absorbed flavor that was in the pot, that has now been put into the water, gets reabsorbed by the kli that's in there. It's like a secondary tam. Since you started off with a pogum flavor, it solves the problem. So the option of the Rosh of waiting 24 hours is quoted by the Ramah as being the accepted custom. Ein lahagel shum kli, kol zman shehu ben yomo. The Ramah says very beferish. You should not do agala if the kli is a ben yomo kli. The Mishnah Berurah also explains the reason for using this approach and not using the shishim option. Misum gzeira shemiyagil kli shel iser bepachos mishishim. It's a gzeira because even if you think it's shishim, if it's not shishim, the kli will never come out of its non-kosher state. Now, what else could you do? Let's say you don't have any breira. You're a caterer, you're doing a wedding, and somehow these kalim got trafed up and it's within 24 hours. You can't wait 24 hours. So do you have a way out? So there's a dispute among the poskim whether it is permitted to add a cleaning agent like bleach or other substance that would ruin the taste of the hagala water, make it noisen tam lifgam, in a case where waiting 24 hours before hagala is not possible. According to the Shulchan Aruch, this is a permitted method of ensuring that none of the forbidden flavor is reabsorbed into the utensil. Yirali, shimnastu efer, if you put ashes, the mayim chaim should be yoira, in hot water in this cauldron, koidim sheinichu akederus besocha, before you put the pots in there that you want to kasher, afal pisha shuman doak behen, and even though there seems to be residue of food stuck to them, even though we said before that hagala wouldn't work, mutter, so I guess in that situation, the prohibited food becomes livgam, so then it's not a prohibited item anymore. That's how the Shulchan Aruch holds. The Shach, though, questions this lenient ruling. Yirli dinzel lo nimsa b'shum posek. The Shach says he doesn't know where the Shulchan Aruch got it. Below shum echad ma'achronim iskiru, gam bebeit Yosef lo iskiru. So that's important because the Beis Yosef himself, that was the Shulchan Aruch. That's Rav Yosef Karo. So there are times where you'll find a source in the Beis Yosef, even though he doesn't bring it to Shulchan Aruch, but the Shach points out he doesn't see it even in the Beis Yosef. The ancient takana lahagil kli ben yomo, that if you have a 24-hour kli, there's no takana for that. Only im sheyesh b'mayim shishim neged kli. So the Chazon Ish suggests the fine distinction that maintains the principle of the Shulchan Aruch while accepting the Shach's critique in the specific cases of ashes. According to Chazon Ish, it's specifically where one uses a substance such as ashes, which detracts from the taste but does not ruin it entirely, that it's forbidden to place it in the pot according to the Shach. But if one placed a bitter substance that ruined the water so that it was totally undrinkable, the rule of noisin tam lifgam is applicable and it would be permitted. Here is the Chazon Ish comment on Yoreh De'ah. Yirelishim nosnu efer, uvetaz v'sifsei kohen, the Taz and the Shach chol kol zeh, right? He points out that the Taz and the Shach argued with the Shulchan Aruch. V'nam kli shetev shemagilin ben yomo. If you have a kli that's a 24-hour kli, and bein b'mayim shishi negel, you don't have 60 volume against the kli. D'ba'ama lo hutra kli mishum da'mayim nesarim, because the water gets that prohibited flavor. The chayzer v'nivlon can't go back into the kli. However, in nosen b'mayim, if you put into the water davar mar, something bitter, ad shenisrachu, it ruins the nifsalu machila sodam, that a person wouldn't drink it. Shapir also hagala lekli. This hagala would work. Afagav de bishlubo. And even let's say you cooked in a pot like this, achra hagala in a tafshel pogum, b'chazina de lo nivla b'gedera kol kach me'amar. We see that this bitter flavor didn't get absorbed into the pot. Ad shimar tafshel, so you don't feel bitterness in the dish that you cooked in. As long as the water that you kashered the kli became unusable, the flavor that got absorbed in that water will not turn around and aser the pot that's reabsorbing that flavor. The absorbed flavor that the water absorbs immediately gets ruined by the bleach that's in there. So that's a nice Chazon Ish, which we use that leniency. If you bring a kli that was not ben yomo in the communal agol events that often takes place before Pesach, the custom is not to rely on the assumption that everyone will leave the kalim for 24 hours prior without using them. Therefore, in order to prevent problems, a strong cleaning agent like bleach is added. And therefore, any potential potent taste left in the utensil is ruined. There's no concern of one mixing the flavor of basar b'chalav, and there's no concern that the flavor that are expelled will be absorbed in the utensils, since it was already rendered impotent or pogum. Once it's pogum, it does not forbid the utensils. Likewise, in places where they cannot wait 24 hours before performing agola, one should use a substance that will ruin the taste of the water and kasher it that way. So how does the actual Hagala process go? The first part of the actual Hagala is to boil the water inside a larger clean pot that has not been used within 24 hours. Hagala water must be boiling, though it need not be on the fire anymore, as recorded in the Shulchan Aruch. Kli Rishon, a Kli Rishon is a Kli that was on the fire initially. Nikras yotichu bo mayim ala eish, right? Afilu eno atala eish, rakshor denerotech. That means, as long as the water is still boiling, you can remove the pot from the fire, as long as it's still boiling. Now, what is the definition of roseach, boiling? According to the Mogen Avram, it seems that even water that has reached Yad Soledispo. Now remember, gentlemen, we learned that he had the same leniency last week. Yad Soledispo is like 114 degrees. Fahrenheit, boiling is 212 degrees. So he says Yad Soledispo, which was, he had a lenient opinion regarding Libun Kal. Says the Mogen Avram, Shoden Roseach Shayat Soledispo. But the Taz and the Mishnah are right that the water must be a rolling boil, meaning that it's bubbling. Says the Taz, Avalakaf Asura, Dagola Tzricha Roiskin Shamala Resicha. It's gotta have bubbles. Lean Isser, Oyser Rak, Emayat Soledispo. That means if you cook a spoon in with something treif, and you're only at Yad Soledispo is heat that asers. See, you need 212 to do agala. but yatzoletispo is enough to transfer a prohibited flavor into a kli. So we're machmir both ways. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'yu hamayim alin resicha. It's got to be bubbling. Now, one should ideally place the entire utensil into the water at one time. However, if it's too large and does not fit, the Tur in your day writes that one may immerse the utensil piece by piece in sections. However, one must ensure that every part of the utensil is placed in the water at some point. V'makli gadol, shena yochel lachnis kulo ke'echad at one time. Yachnis chetzio v'achar kav chetzio v'ashena v'dayim. If the pot that needs to be kashered is too large to place inside another pot at all, you can still kasher that pot. One should boil hot water inside of it and allow the water to fill up and then spill over the sides so that every part of the pot comes in contact with the water. So says the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, al basar b'chalav, kli gadol she'efshar lagilo, o kasher lagilo b'kli acher. It's such a big kli, you can't put in another kli. Yesh od ofen she'achol lagilo she'achar she'inaki akli etev. After you clean it, the yamtin chav daled shos, wait 24 hours. Mizman bliasa iser, from when it was used for this iser. Yimale akli b'mayim, you fill it with water. V'yamidenu ala eish. Ad she'alu hamayim shebesochel resicha, so v'zeu sh'akli. You can just boil the water in the kli. And choisher shema bizman shnis bashal ha'isr b'kli, alu bevuvei haresicha me'al tfanos v'nivla isra al sfasad tfanois milmala. Meaning, let's say when you use the kli for the isser, you're concerned that the isser food came all the way up to the top and the lip. So you have to kasher the lip as well and the walls. So zeyasa ad shikach even or barzel, you take a stone or a piece of metal and heat it up until it's the same temperature. V'chamim ad shechomem shava lechum hamayim roschim b'kli ma'at yoser, or maybe more. V'achar kach yachnisem l'mayim, you put it into the water, and therefore the water will overflow the pot. Uv'achnasasam l'mayim, you remove sheyalo hamayim aros ma'asfas hakli. Actually, right, and that's a way to kasher a kli that's too big to go into a hagala vessel. One must make sure to kasher all parts of the utensil, even those that do not directly touch the food, including the handles. Said the Mordechai Psachim, v'chein eitz parur magila b'roiskan afilu habeis yad. Let's say you have a ladle where the part that picks up the soup is metal, but the handle is wood. You have to kasher everything, because the prohibition travels not just through the metal but through the wood. The Shulchan Aruch accepts this as the practical halacha as well, that all handles must be immersed in the hot water during the hagala process. Kol hakelim tzarech lahagil yidoseyem kamosan. You have to kasher the handles. And the Mishnah Berurah explains that the reason for this is twofold. First, the absorption of taste, at least with regard to metal, spreads throughout the utensil, including into the handle. Meaning, if you have a metal pot and the handles are metal, so the flavor doesn't just go into the walls of the pot, it travels into the handle. Second, perhaps the handle absorbs chametz directly from a kli rishon at some point, and this applies even to non-metal utensils, such as wooden and earthenware ones. Number one, we say that the absorption went into the whole thing. That might apply only to metal handles, because there is a concept, the cham miktzaso cham kulo. So in Isser v'Heter, when you're talking about kalim, and you think that only part of the kli got heated to yatzoletispo and touched and therefore absorbed a dvar isser, and now it transferred into the kli. What about if the whole we say a concept of if part of the kli was cham, we assume the whole kli was cham. That's the concept of cham mikzaso cham kulo. So he's using the same concept to say that the prohibited flavor transfers into the handle. The eighth port right? You have to, even a wooden handle has to be kosher, according to Mordechai. Maybe some chametz spilled on the handle directly from another kli. Or maybe when you washed it, right? When you're doing dishwashing, or in a frying pan, some drops flew out. So the Ramok clarifies, though, that if one did not perform hagol on the handles, the utensil is considered kosher. Miyu. So we don't say b'di, if you did it and you cooked in it, the food's not treif. What you can do is you can take hot water and pour it. That's irui kli rishon. And if you pour hot water on them, on the vessels, on the handles, that'll work. The Mishnah explains the reasoning of the Ramah concerning metal, the same way that the handle absorbs chametz can expel it without the water directly touching it. In addition, he explains that the concern that perhaps hot chametz spill on the handle directly is not strong enough to forbid the utensil from being usable. Says the Mishnah Brura, Ein Lesser, he explains why the Ramah was lenient. Afilu b'kli matchos mishum damrinon, the kashem shenivla chametz b'hayad al yedei gufa kli, kenat niflo b'men al yedei agola shel gufa kli. Right, this concept that we said, that this prohibited flavor, whether it's chametz or something else, is absorbed into the handle through the goof of the utensil. So therefore, when you do hagala of the goof of the utensil, it draws the flavor out of the handle as well. Just like it got it, it removes it. All the other chashosha, we're not concerned about if b'diavad you didn't do it. In addition to the handles, the Shulchan Aruch writes that you also have to do hagala on the lid. Kisu shel barzel, shemechasim bo kedei tzarich hagala. Kiven shemizeya b'chol sham v'chol magder. It gets absorption from the steam from the pot, and if something is treif in there, it's going to go into the lid too. And in fact, if you had a lid of a pot on Pesach that you did not do hagala on, kol atavshel aser, shezeh akisu misraim v'tavshel. You have to worry about the absorption that was in the kisu, that was in the lid. Now, how long do you have to leave a kli in for the hagala? The Rishonim dispute how much time utensil must remain in the hot water so that the hagala is effective. The halacha is that even a short time is adequate, as mentioned by the Ben Ish Chai. Moreover, he recommends against leaving the utensil in the hot water for too long, because maybe it'll reabsorb. Right? V'tov lashos manas hakli b'soch haroschim, k'tei shikanas haroschim l'toch ovei hakli, k'tei yitzis hagil lachutz, so that you remove the absorbed flavor. V'davka sheyeh muetes yishosam avolo yisheh harbe, shouldn't leave it in there for a long time. Rinsing following hagala. Once the utensil has been immersed in the boiling water, the hagala is complete. The utensil is kosher. However, Tosfos cites an additional custom to immerse the utensil in cold water following the hagala. Says Tosfos Avodah Zarah, Umar shenagul asos, lases kli hamugal b'mayim tzonim miyad achar hagala. This was already a custom 1,000 years ago, in the time of Tosfos, that after you did hagala in hot water, you rinsed it in cold water. He says, Aim Leda Lama Nagu came. Says we don't know why the minig is that. Harayesh Mefarish, Hadik Amr Shtifi Yisei Rasa, because it says in one of the sources an additional rinsing. Hainu, Shtei Shtifos Pitzone, where you rinse it twice in cold. Abba betruma less, so desagi b'shtifa achas. But if you're going to use it for truma, one rinsing is enough. The lashon yisir mashmakein. Valzen nogu b'shtifa tzon b'chol hagolos. So Tosfos thinks it's related to that. Rashi, in his Chuvas, explains the custom of rinsing fire and gas stemming from concern that the taste one is removing through agala will be reabsorbed. Says Rashi, because of Chuvos b'shem Rashi, shalachar agalas kelim miyad be'odem hamayim roschem aleim, while there are still droplets of hot water, tzarich ladicha b'mayim korim, you got to rinse it off with cold water. Pen yachzeru v'yivlu ha'yisurin shaleim be'em roschem, because they might reabsorb. Again, we said we're using an eno ben yomo kli, so an eno ben yomo kli is not going to be a problem with that. But anyways, so this custom was accepted by the Shulchan Aruch as well. Nohagim lishtof akli b'mayim karim achra golamiyad. The Mishnah Brura explains the reason for this rinsing in the same manner as Rashi. However, he then states that if it was not done, the kashering is still valid, since that concern is not applicable to our methods of performing agala, either after 24 hours, where there's already nois and tam livkam, or we put bleach in there, right? Right? Says the Mishnah, Miyad Kadesh L'Yachzer V'Yivlo B'Mayim Roskim Shalem, that's Rashi. Sheyesh Ben Plitas HaChametz, Mikol Mokum B'Di'eved, Afim Lo Shotav Klal, Ein Lochush. No, Ein Magilam El Kodim Zman Yisur. First of all, we don't do Agala prior. We always do Agala prior to Chametz being Asur. O Shueni Ben Yomo, or we're dealing with a non-Ben Yomo Kli. O Sheyesh B'Mayim Shishim Negdo. Or he didn't say putting bleach in like the Chazon Ish or V'chein Yer Lomar. So b'di'evet, if you didn't rinse it, it works out in our day to be okay. Now, there's one type of utensil for which kashering is ineffective, and that is klicheres, earthenware. This includes ceramic, china, similar materials that are made out of earth. The reason is that it's very difficult to remove all the absorption found in earthenware, meaning that Hagala will not be effective. The Shulchan Aruch codifies this halacha based on the Gemara Pesachim. Kedei shel cheres, shenishtamish ben chametz kol hashana. You have earthenware kelim that has been used for chametz. Afilu osam she'osim behem daisa. If you make like cereal, oatmeal, umine kmachim, flour. Meshash v'meitev b'inyan shloyei chametz nikar behem. You have to clean it so that there's no chametz remaining there, because b'al yiro b'yimotzei. Umuter la'shoyis la'achar Pesach, right? You have to store them away, and of course you sell them, right? Aval hesek she'asikim be'esh. You can't kasher them in fire, in a moil lehem. V'lo l'shum kli cheresh nishtamish b'mchamin, afilu ayidei ha'or, ele she'ir l'socha roschim. He says there may be some exceptional cases where china or other expensive earthenware utensils may be kashered, if otherwise it will cause a major loss, though not for Pesach. Kashering glass. We discussed the question of kashering glass cups and other utensils at length in the shir on halachic principles in keeping a kosher kitchen in volume 4. If you remember, it's machlokas the Sephardim and Ashkenazi, right? The Shulchan Aruch said you don't need to kasher glass, and Ashkenazi, the Ramah says you do. Just summarize the bottom line here, which was that according to Shulchan Aruch and Sephardic practice, glass does not absorb, and there's no need to kasher it. While according to Ramah and Ashkenazi practice, glass is comparable to earthenware and cannot be kashered at all, at least for Pesach. Even if you use the glassware for storage, meaning there's a chance that the glass is going to absorb because something has been kept in there for a long time. Or let's say you use it for hot. I have to do is rinse it. However, the Ramah quotes Yesh Machmirim, Hagala doesn't help. They're like earthenware. That's our minig. That we don't kosher glass. Glass cannot be koshered. Can plastic be koshered?
But we don't toivel glass either.
We don't?
When we have a set of new glasses.
Sydney, we learned it's like
forgot.
metal. It's like metal. We did toivel glassware.
You do?
Which here I'm going back to page 154.
Lucite, you don't have to.
Which
Okay,
materials
all right.
require? Which materials, when food utensils made of metal, glass, or plated on the inside with lead are acquired from a Gentile, they must be immersed in a mikveh.
Okay.
So we hold by tefillas kalim. They do you do because remember, Sydney, it's a different concept. Remember we talked there. It's like converting, just like a person who converts to Yiddishkeit. Remember the Ritva said that you put him in a mikveh. The change of on, so it's nothing to do with blias.
Right.
It's to do with blias. So there it had to do with what was considered in midya, like so the glass was considered like metal. Here it has to do with the blias, and the Ashkenazic opinion is that they do absorb, and you can't get the absorption out. We have to go back to volume 4. There was one of the Rishonim, the Ramah is choshesh to one of the Rishonim that learned that way. I think the
glass is made of glass. You can supposedly for Pesach, you can, if you don't use them and you leave them in water for 24 hours, you can use them for Pesach. Is that correct or not?
No. We learned tonight that you can't kosher glassware.
I'm almost sure that it.
In the 60s, they would tell people that they can soak it for 3 days in the bathtub.
We're gonna get that thing about the 3 days. We're gonna see today. That's about plastic.
Yeah, something that you put in a bathtub in water for a few days. Huh?
That's by plastic. I don't know about glass.
Glass, as far as I heard.
Glass, where we used to do that.
In the olden days,
glass.
in the 60s.
Okay, but tonight
Now
tonight we're learning that according to Ashkenazi practice, we are machmir by Kles Chuchis that afil hagal lo ma'anilu. That's both for Trefus and for Pesach. Let's see weiter. Another type of material whose status, you've never koshered glass.
No,
No.
but I remember like in the 60s, the rabbis would say that you could put them in a bathtub for 3 days, but who would, that's what people would
We'll see.
I don't know kosher, but I don't remember toivel.
But
toiveling.
people are wealthier today. People can afford
I don't know.
glasses.
Sydney,
buy
you
glasses for
remember
$1.
koshering glass at all?
Not koshering, no, but maybe not even toiveling at all. That's what I'm saying.
No,
don't know.
toiveling there was.
No, but
Another,
now,
I remember what
you buy glass for
what
$1.
Susie is saying is exactly what I remember when we were growing up, learning. Leaving a bathtub for 72 hours.
Right, but today they don't do that because people can afford to buy a glass. They're cheap. They're $1.
well, we're going to see the 3-day business in a minute, but it's let's read the Pischei Tshuvas. Remember, the Pischei Tshuvas wrote in the 18. He's like the Mishnah Brura for Yoredeya.
Right.
We have the Badei HaShulchan.
There was a lot of
So
poverty.
the Pischei Tshuva is going to give us a dispute about plastic. Kli plastic. Oh, this is the Pischei Tshuvas, not the Pischei Tshuvas. This must be a more contemporary person because they didn't have plastics in the 18th.
Plastic has to be contemporary. I mean, it's new stuff. It's
I'm sorry.
It's 30 years old. 30 years old when we started.
I didn't read carefully. The Pischei Tshuvas is the Achron that is the major Achron in your day. This is the Pischei Tshuvas. So he's a more modern posek, and he's going to talk about clay plastic. Gumi, the nylon, right? Rubber, nylon, like what do you call what I always tell you to put things in? The Tupperware, right? Plastic, rubber. He says the reality is they're not like glass. The absorption can come in. The sofik tam and they can absorb. Va'af plastic, even if it's smooth. Lachein af l'shitas ha'mechaber tzarich kli plastic hechsher. So even though the Shulchan Aruch said that glass did not absorb, he says the Shulchan Aruch would have agreed that here that they do absorb. El shadano achronim imoy lahem hechsher. So the only question is, does hechsher solve the problem? The Ramok clearly said by glass that it's lo mahani, that glass absorbs, but just like by earthen, it absorbs too much. Why can't we kasher earthenware? Because you can't get the absorption out. So that's the shita that the Ramah relies on by glass. And that's the Achronim also debate plastic and rubber. In moilam hechsher, does hechsher work? We know that they absorb. The question is, can Agola get it out? Given plastic vagumi.
Today they coat some of that with nanotechnology, which is hard and non-porous. So, the process has changed over the last couple of years. You can heat some of the plastic today. So, it's just it's not.
So he says, okay. So let's see what he does. Kiven sha plastic vagumi mechilim tarkuvos kimios shonos. They are made out of different chemicals. V'hu min chadash shalosh sharum avosenu. It's a little bit what Walter is saying. All of these are being made out of materials that really our forefathers didn't know anything about. So that's why many of the Achronim want to say that because we don't know, we should say that the Agola doesn't work. Onan, Rabimi Poskes Manenu. However, poskim of our generation, they should not be compared to earthenware. He says they've done experiments that today's plastic absorbs and gives off just like metal. There's no reason to aser. It's only if you need libur, right? If it was bekli rishon shala'esh, or no, here's even on water. Plastic what he's saying here is that if you use this vessel to cook on the fire with water, then you're going to have a problem. Because you have to have a gala bekli rishon. This plasticware might get destroyed, and we're concerned you're not going to do it a good job, like we had before last week. But let's say you have taken the pot. Let's say these kalim are used not on the fire, but you pour them from a kli rishon that has been taken off of a fire. Or be'iru mi kli rishon, or you pour from a kli rishon. Or bamish, you transferred it into a kli sheni. Asher lagilo kederch shimusho. Then you can use a kli sheni or irui in order to kasher that plastic. This is called kavush. If a kli will absorb a prohibited item if you soak something in a kli for 24 hours. It means without heat, right? We've been learning that prohibited flavors get absorbed in the kli because of heat. Yatso lettuce. Now, we've also learned malicha, salting, will transfer flavor. Here's another new concept, kavush. If you take a yayin nesef or treif milk, and you put it in a vessel, and you let it sit there for 24 hours, even though it's cold, that's called kavush chavdalit shows, and that's how it became aser. After lachshira, they milu v'iri mayim gimel yomim. So then you can fill it up and empty it, for 3 days. Now, if these plasticware were only used with cold, I have to do is rinse it. Yesh poskim shekosfu shekli plastic elu sheyaduim she'emis kaklim beroschit. Now, let's say you have plasticware that we know will not be ruined in hot water. Mutter lagilam apakli rishon shovel al eish. Then you can do regular hagola. The yesh shekosfu she'afla b'chmir manal hasovim shekli plastic dinam kekli cheres, and you can't kosher them. Im yagilam sholosh pamim yoel gam l'shitosim. What you do hagola 3 times. And if they observe, if what they absorb is only a rabbinic isser, then you can be lenient as well, I guess, to allow hagola in that way. Doesn't say anything about glassware here, that you can use this irui 3 days. It's by plastic that acquired it through kvisha only. But then you have this thing about that some plastics have the status of earthenware, and it would be permitted to perform hagola 3 times. I never knew that you could take earthenware kalim and do it 3 times. That might be the
What?
whether one can kosher glass utensils for non-chametz related purposes. We discussed that in volume 4. We'll have to bring that back. Right, and there may be, as we said, there are some exceptions, not for Pesach, but for treifus, there are ways to kosher china or expensive earthenware, if it's going to be a hefsid meruba. And it could be this thing about doing 3 times hagola. We'll have to save that. The custom in many places in Israel today is to kosher hard plastic utensils that do not contain any holes or crevices that are difficult to clean. But many in the diaspora are stringent not to kosher plastic before Pesach, due to Rav Moshe, who was stringent on that matter. Uvedavar kli merubber, right? Rubber vessels, imani agola. Now rubber, shum eitz, he says, rubber is made 2 ways. Sometimes it comes from a tree, vir ma'ani agola. V'amif yesh sofik mitzat yesh gam eze chomer kimi, if it's chemical, usofik drabonon, shehu lekula. However, yesh rubber she'eno me'etz. There's a rubber that does not come from wood. Element taruvis minim kimiyim. They're synthetic chemicals. Shudavar chadash. Shalom nimtza b'divrei kadmonim. He says, ein lahatir lagilam. We're going to close today with koshering countertops. I'm speaking for those in Los Angeles. Chaim is young, almost a different generation, but Sydney will remember this. We grew up, all the countertops were covered with silver foil. Correct, Sydney? You can unmute him.
Correct, yes.
This is the Pesach, everything was covered.
What? You think I'm really like that young?
No, then people had.
Okay, so you remember also that in your
We
kitchens,
were better. We covered with linoleum.
Yeah, no, there was special.
what do you mean
If you could
linoleum?
afford it, you had custom boards made up.
We
Oh,
always
you
had.
cut it and you put it
My
down.
parents always had custom boards.
I see. Okay, but many, on Pesach, when you walked into most people's kitchens, you saw a lot of silver foil.
Right.
In Israel, it's still like that, by the way.
Oh, it's still like that. Okay. So when koshering for Pesach, there are a number of other parts of the kitchen that must be discussed, such as the counters. May the counters be koshered, or must one cover them? Many counters in the United States are made of formica and similar brands, which are essentially a form of plastic. This would be subject to the machlokas we just discussed about concerning plastic. Can you kosher plastic? Can you not kosher plastic? Those that allow koshering plastic may kosher formica as well, while those that refrain from doing so would not be allowed to kosher formica. and would simply need to clean and cover the counter well. Other popular materials used for countertops include granite, limestone, and quartz. According to most poskim, these materials are permitted to be kasher. I'm just going to read the footnote here. There are some who hold that quartz counters, one example being Caesar stone, which are popular in some places in Israel, as well as in the diaspora, similar to earthenware, may not be kasher. However, the majority approach is that they are more similar to stone and are permitted. That's the position of the CRC and the OU.
Have a riot on their hands.
Though counters made of ceramic, limestone, and other materials similar to earthenware may not be kasher. How should one who plans to kasher the countertop proceed? According to Shulchan Aruch, one pours boiling hot water on surfaces where food is often placed during the year, and hot liquid, such as soup, occasionally spills, as per the principle of Kabbalah kach poto. Hashulchanos, tables, vatevos, a china closet, or other places where you store the tables or boxes that you stored either food in or kelim in. Shematznim b'hem oichlin kol hashana, a bread box, or other, like we have, what are our things called?
Cabinet?
Our kitchen cabinets. So they kashered these things.
How do you kasher it? Just
Regilim la'arus aleim roschim, they poured hot water on it.
can't pour hot water.
Lefish lefamim nishpach marak min hakter l'sochan. We don't put hot soup in a kitchen cabinet. That's on our counter. So therefore you have to put boiling water there. Based on this, some poskim hold that what should clean the counters, wait 24 hours during which no hot chametz comes in contact with the counter, and then pour boiling hot water, heat it up on the fire all over the counter. However, other poskim hold that this may not be adequate. Rather, they require moving an even meluban, a hot stone, over the counter due to concern that a hot solid piece of chametz also likely touched the counter. It wasn't just a spill of hot soup. That would work with pouring boiling water. But if you dropped a piece of solid chametz on it, that's almost like putting it on the fire directly. So if a hot solid piece of chametz touched the counter during the year, which is similar to baking, and as discussed above, the halacha according to Ramah is that one must be stringent to kasher in accordance with the minority usage of the utensil. Remember last week we learned that if you use a utensil 90% of the time for this, but only 10% for baking, so according to Shulchan Aruch, you only have to use hagala. You don't have to worry about the minority usage. But we Ashkenazim have to worry about the minority usage. So since we have to be worried that the minority usage of that thing could be like baking, and that's the Mishnah Berurah. La'arosat mekli rishon u'marena Rav Yaakov Weil pasak lo ma'ani irui. He says pouring boiling water won't work. Mipnei shelafamim meisim alav pashtid acham, a piece of kugel, v'havakilo nishtamish bekli rishon. So it's as if the counter was a kli rishon. Ele yachshim al yedei even meluban. You have to take a hot stone. V'yishpach alav roschim v'yizgagel l'mokam ach v'yishpach alav. So you move that stone around and you pour hot water. Kidei sheyelchu haroschim bekulo. So the hot water goes everywhere. Uv'zeh da'afilu ma'roschim hu mekli sheni. Dan netochem al adaf avi kekli rishon. V'az muter l'niach aleim afilu matzah chamo. You could put even a hot matzah there. But you have it muter al yedei iri levad. Mishnah Berurah says even if you just pour it, it works. Chatchila, you shouldn't rely on that. The Aruch HaShulchan also discusses kashering tables and other similar surfaces and records the custom to pour boiling water on the surface. He then mentions the custom to use a hot stone as well, but argues that it's not necessary. Tables and cabinets that you put chametz in. You have tables that you put pots on. We're talking about you put hot pots on that table. Medina enam shrichim hagala. Really, make a radin, you don't have to do hagala because you have a pot between the chametz and the table. Ve'ena boleh klal. Therefore, there's no bliya. Something overflowed the pot, like some soup, and therefore there might have been a direct bliya of chametz. Therefore, he says because that's a soup. However, so the Aruch HaShulchan says that boiling hot water is acceptable. Some recommend trying to use a hot stone or an equivalent of an electric urn that is plugged in to pour the water, while others, such as the CRC, hold that boiling water is sufficient, provided it is still boiling when it's poured in every spot, or you can just cover the counter. What about the sink? The majority of the time, a sink is used with cold water from the faucet, but sometimes hot water that is yad solet is supposed used when washing dishes, washing one's hands, which can cause absorption of chametz into the sink if there's food residue poured into it. This is another example where the halacha depends on the question of koshering based on the majority usage of the item or considering the minority usage. According to the Shulchan Aruch and Sephardi custom, we follow the majority, and the sink could be cleaned well and washed. You don't have to do anything else. According to Ramon Ashkenazi custom, one would need to clean and kosher it through boiling hot water from the fire all over it. Some would require using a hot stone similar to the counter due to the concern that a hot solid chametz fell in and touched the sink directly. And this is what Reb Shimon Eider, in his English language work on the laws of Pesach. By the way, Shimon Eider learned in Lakewood. He was Bobby Younger, Lava Shalom. I had a classmate, Marvin Younger, so his older brother Bobby, we all remember him from Hancock Park. So he was very close with Shimon Eider. And Bobby Younger wrote, when I was in Rambam in high school, something called 144 ways to get through a Seder. All the halachas of the Seder night. And unfortunately, my father had passed away, so I had to do the Seder. And I used, and Bobby, that thing was really based on all of the halachas of Rav Shimon Eider. So, and then Rav Shimon Eider has also, he came up like in the 60s and 70s, Hilchas Lulav, Hilchas Tefillin. He was a prolific writer in English, in Hebrew and in English.
You had Hilchas Shabbos, Hilchas Erevin.
Yeah. So Sidney, did you remember
the
Reb Shimon?
paperbacks? Of course, the paperbacks.
You're the paperbacks, right? So Reb Shimon Eider is. I'm so glad that they quoted him because he was someone that was very involved in halakha in Los Angeles because.
I want to give you a little perspective.
Yeah.
When I was a boy in Camp Monk, he was giving the main shiur.
Wow.
When I was older already, I used to be in his shiur, but he was also the swimming instructor in the camp.
Oh, so you're a lot younger than me,
He
Bernie.
decided he had a good.
Bernie, you're a lot younger than I am.
But when
Shimon
the SLS test,
he learned forever.
He promised that we would not teach swimming in any co-ed camp.
Ernie?
Yes.
Where we end up, I didn't see it, I missed it, about China. Something, I remember something about waiting a year to use it. I don't know if it's.
No, you can't, in general, we don't kosher it, but there are some heterim, there's exceptional cases where China or other expensive earthenware utensils may be koshered if it will be a hefsed meruba, though not for Pesach. You can never kosher that for Pesach, but you can for tarfus. It could have been that you have to do it 3 times, but it's got to be a hefsed meruba. It's not in a regular case.
Or whatever that means. I mean, it means you can't buy a used pair of. You find a very expensive pair of China,
No.
and you purchase
So
it.
hefsed meruba would be, let's say there's a bar mitzvah going on, and there's only one set of kalim. You're going to lose thousands of dollars if you don't use those kalim. See what I'm saying? That meaning it wouldn't be a lechatchila din. It would be some kind of, it's hefsed meruba, and there's a certain way you have to do it, which they didn't go into. for our purposes in general, so earthenware kelim kli cheres cannot be kosher.
So like if you were, let's say you were to do a bar mitzvah at a hotel and they said, listen, you either can buy new dishes or we can take our treif dishes and we can kosher them by leaving them in soaking water for 3 days or something like that.
No, it's yeah. So we'll have to see. So if that means what exactly thinking more, you've already spent $100,000 on the food, and now you have to to kosher this earthenware kelim. That would be a hefsed meruba. See what I'm saying?
I just gave you the example.
Okay, so fine. That might be that. So if you have hefsed meruba and you follow whatever procedures, Rav Shimon Eider, they quoted.
You can't, because they said you can't do it.
But not for Pesach.
You can't
Not
plan
for
to
Pesach.
do it. You can't. You're saying you can't plan to do it. You can't say, yeah, we'll just kosher dishes.
Yeah,
So,
no, you can't plan it. Exactly. It's got to be a b'di'eveh. It's got to be a hefsed meruba. It's got to be some emergency situation. But I wanted to say, see the commentaries on Yoreh De'ah. See Rav Shimon Eider, page 138. It means in Rav Shimon Eider's in that book Halachos of Pesach, I have that. So I'll see if I'll try to look that up, see what method he uses there. But let's just finish. What does Rav Shimon Eider say about the sink? The sink should not be used for chametz for 24 hours. Dry the sink. Pour boiling hot water from a kli rishon into all portions of the sink. The use of a hot stone is preferred, since hot pieces of food may have fallen inside. It should be noted that metal sinks may be kosher in this manner, but porcelain sinks, older sinks that usually look white, are considered like earthenware, according to most poskim, may not be kosher.
mm-hmm.
Instead, one would cover the sink or use a sink insert or racks. That's what we had. Either we had silver foil, we had like rubber things and racks. You didn't see the sink most of Pesach.
Or covered in silver foil.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. I think we finished texture kelim.